Hello, this is Lisa Alewine. Welcome back to our study in the 7 Abominations of the Wicked Lamp, Workbook 2. In our last program, we looked at the 4 altar judgments. We're trying to review a little bit now. We're to the 7th seal. We're trying to wrap up these 7 seals so that we can continue on into the 7 trumpets and take a look at those 7 trumpets. Those are pretty easy to understand if you're familiar with the feasts and what must go on along with the feasts. If you're familiar with the Jubilee, the Yovel, the trumpets really make a whole lot of practical sense. It's sometimes a little bit harder to get a grip on the seals, but the trumpets really, to me, are the easiest to figure out what's going on. So we're headed in that direction right now. We're just wrapping up the 4 altar judgments and how, as these seals open, this is what's happening. The altar judgments are being released out into the earth. And of course, we know that they are famine, plague, wild beasts, and sword. And in the last program, we gave you the underpinning of those words. What do they mean even beyond what they mean? What is a sword even beyond a sword? What is a famine beyond a famine? And that's important to understand because in Deuteronomy 23 through 25, as Moses is predicting this and prophesying this over Israel, he's saying these 4 altar judgments in some form will come upon you. These misfortunes will come upon you if you don't obey the word. And so I wanted to give you another passage that you could compare. I always look at the Torah as the proto-prophecy that everything else is going to rest on or hang on. And so where Moses gives you those 4 altar judgments in Deuteronomy, Ezekiel repeats them in chapter 5, verse 12. He says, and if this sounds familiar to you, it's because you read it in Revelation, by the way. When people die in thirds and things are destroyed in thirds, you say, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. Well, it's right here in Ezekiel. He says, 1/3 of you will die by plague, which is the pestilence or the dever, or be consumed by famine. Remember that famine is ra'av, to be hungry. 1/3 will fall by the sword, cherev, which can literally be the sword, a killing sword, or it can be a thirst, a craving that cannot be satisfied. If I had to use a modern comparison to this craving that a sword is, because, you know, in I guess the more, I don't know if you call it poetic, but in describing the work of the sword, sometimes in Scripture it'll say, like, you know, the sword thirsts for blood or whatever. Is a sword literally thirsty? No, not really. Not if it's a piece of metal, it just doesn't get thirsty. But if you look at the meaning of the sword, the cherev, which means to be thirsty, to have this craving, then, you know, this modern craving for everything that is at your fingertips because of the internet. You can have almost anything delivered to your doorstep. You know, the best foods, the most recent electronic updates. I mean, we have voracious appetites, the best clothes, the best gadgets, the best so-called make your life easier. Oh no, but wait, there's more if you order now. And we're just inundated with goods, services, things that feed the beast, because the more you consume these things, the more you crave them, the more you want. And so the sword doesn't have to be battle. It can be, but it can also be a people who will be afflicted and destroyed by unresolved craving. They will crave and crave and crave to the point that they destroy themselves. So addiction would fall into that category. And we've got in the United States, we have a terrible problem with addiction. An addiction problem is a plague of the sword, of the unquenchable craving. He says, 1/3 I will scatter to every wind. And remember the 4 angels and the 4 winds? I will unsheathe the sword behind them. Thus my anger will be spent, and I will satisfy my wrath on them. Now, there's another connection to the book of Revelation, because in Revelation you're reading about the wrath of the Lamb. And so the wrath of the Lamb is the Father's wrath. He says, I will satisfy my wrath on them, and I will be appeased. Then they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken in my zeal when I have spent my wrath upon them. Moreover, I will make you a desolation and a reproach among the nations which surround you in the sight of all who pass by. So it will be a reproach, a reviling, a warning, and an object of horror to the nations who surround you when I execute judgments against you in anger, wrath, and raging rebukes. I, the Lord, have spoken, when I send against them the deadly arrows of famine. Right? There's our arrows again, with the white horse riding out, his rider has a bow. Arrows of famine, which were for the destruction of those whom I will send to destroy you. Then I will also intensify the famine upon you and break the staff of bread. I guess this week he may as well have said, I will break the supply chain. Moreover, I will send on you famine and wild beasts. There's two of our judgments. And the wild beasts, they're the chaya. Right? Remember, you've got two kinds. You've got the chayot and you have the behemoth. And this is the chaya from the chayot. I will send on you famine, wild beasts. They will bereave you of children. Plague, which is the dever, and bloodshed also will pass through you. And I will bring the sword on you. And there's the fourth one, the sword. So you've got the plague. And he said, with the plague, or the dever, will come bloodshed. Right? So it's pretty serious stuff. But there's no reason. You know, the apostles tell us, but you're not subject to the wrath. The wrath is not for you. Can you get caught up in consequences? Sure you can. Could you die of a disease? Well, sure you could. But it's not because of his wrath that it's occurring. It's just because you're a mortal human being who hasn't been resurrected yet. There's no wrath with it. And if death is the worst that can happen to a believer, then really it's a good thing. He has things for you to do on the other side as well. So if you were to look at that in a chiastic structure, and if you're not sure what a chiasm is, again, go back and review Workbook 1 until you get pretty familiar with that chiastic structure, because this is the structure of the four horsemen who were executing the 7 seals. Okay? And just as a brief review and overview, remember, you've got 4 horses. You've got a white horse. His rider is going out to conquer. He's carrying the bow. You've got the red horse. He's carrying a sword. You've got the black horse. He's carrying scales. And then you have the pale horse, who is death. Once you understand how that works, then you see how you only need 4 horses. Because the white horse here, once he starts riding, he's also going to take care of the 7th seal. So not just the first seal, but he would begin circling right here, and that would go round and round. Then you would start seeing pretty much, I think this is going to be the plague of disease. And then you have the red horse here with the 2nd seal. What does he do? He starts riding. He's also going to take care of the 6th seal. He'll start riding. He'll start circling around and around. He has the sword, which also means to be thirsty. And remember, it's not just falling on one another with a literal sword, that it's unquenchable cravings. Cravings that lead us into destruction. And then you have the black horse here. He's carrying the scales of justice. We can see that he's predicting a famine And we'll talk about why we know he's talking about a famine. It's based on the words that he's using. He'll ride out, he'll begin circling, and he'll begin going round and round. And he'll deal also with the fifth seal as he goes round and round. And then the pale horse, remember, is death. I'll do this so you don't have to look at the hinges. The pale horse, death, remember on the holy menorah, it started out as one piece of beaten gold, so it was just this piece here. And then their 6 branches were beaten out of it. So when we look at the pale horse, it's the same principle. You start with death. And so the judgments of death, the pale horse, they branch out into the white horse, they branch out into the red horse, they branch out into the black horse. So the white horse will bring death in one way, the red horse will bring death in another way, and the black horse will bring death in another way. But no matter what, it's all coming from the realm of death. It's coming from a realm of judgment. So, we've been looking at the 7th seal. And we know that the 7th seal, it can represent Sukkot, the 7th feast. And we looked at the Hebrew letter that corresponds to it, which would be Zayin. And then we looked at the 2-letter root, Zan, which means nourishment. It can mean all manner of offerings, all manner of produce, all kinds of produce, diverse kinds of things. Like it says, every nation, tribe, and tongue, every kind of people will be there celebrating the Feast of the Nations, Sukkot. And so it makes you think at this time, because it's the 7th seal corresponding to Sukkot, because we're kind of taking a break here from the judgment. So we want to look at what the righteous are doing at this time. While the white horse is riding around here, what are the righteous doing? Well, remember, Sukkot is a feast where it's different from Passover. You're going to bring the first fruits of the barley. Shavuot, you'll bring the first fruits of the wheat. Once you get over to Sukkot, basically you can bring it all in. You can bring from the wine vat, from the threshing floor, from the fruit of the ground, the fruit of the tree, from the flocks, from the herds. It's the first of everything here. And so it's just exactly what Zan means. It's diverse kinds of things. This is our diversity lesson, that at Sukkot, every nation, tribe, and tongue, every kind of produce, every blessing with which we can give thanks to the Holy One. And it was particularly at this feast, at the Feast of Sukkot, that the Torah was read to all Israel. And it wasn't just read to Israel. He said there's always going to be these strangers living among you. And they're supposed to listen to it too, so that they will fear or reverence Adonai. Well, the 7th spirit, you've got wisdom, understanding, counsel, Ruach Adonai, power, knowledge, and then reverence, the fear of Adonai. Well, he says, I want you to read the Torah at Sukkot so that even the stranger will learn to fear Adonai. If you fear Adonai, there's no reason any of the judgments of these 4 horses should you experience wrath, unless you're disobedient. But if you are obedient, there's no reason to experience the wrath of the Lamb, because the Lamb's job is actually to sustain you, even in the wrath. His job is to nourish you, even in the wrath, because you're like Jacob's many colored flocks. And that's what the prophecy is, from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat, from one 7th to another. All flesh, he says, shall come to worship before me. Well, it's his job to nourish his flocks. It's not his job to form flocks and then to walk away and not care for them. Those are the wicked shepherds that do that. So for right now, we're looking for a day when we can say, yes, the wrath is going on outside. Let's hide right here in the sukkah for a little while until the indignation is past. It's been such a struggle to keep the Shabbat. It's been such a struggle to keep the appointed times. It's been such a struggle to eat according to the way that the Father tells us to eat. It's been such a struggle to treat our neighbors the way that Yeshua said we must treat our neighbors. But all of these add up, in spite of the struggle, to reverence. You reverenced Adonai enough that you obeyed him when it was inconvenient, when it did cut into your pocketbook, when it did diminish the number of your friends. In spite of all those things, in spite of all the afflictions and the struggles and the troubles, you held fast to his appointed times, to his Sabbaths, and you did the things that were pleasing to him. And so when you see the wrath of the Lamb, that's when you need to look up. That's when the deliverer is coming. And he's going to gather us. Remember, he talks about how he's going to spread his tabernacle over us. In the time of the kings of Israel, the king had a private walkway to the temple. It was called the covered way of the throne, from the palace to the temple. And he's going to gather us up under this covered way of the throne. We're going to be able to sing the praises, like it says in Revelation. We're going to be able to rest for a little while until the resurrection of our bodies. And so as we gather there, we can hear, we can fear in terms of reverence, we can know, we can obey the sound of the trumpets. It's very important because the trumpets are blown over the Moedim. And those days of matzah and bitter herbs that we endured for the sake of the word, now is when we enter in to the presence. We maintain the testimony of Yeshua. We maintain the commandments of God. And what we are going to find is that forever we will be abundantly nourished with all those wonderful breads that are going to be prepared from the threshing floor of the Great Tribulation. I don't know if you remember when Joshua and Caleb came back with a report of the Promised Land. The 10 spies are giving reasons why they can't do it. And Joshua and Caleb says, no, don't be afraid of the Canaanites. The inhabitants of the land, they say, they will be food for us. This tribulation, this battle to go into the land, in the end, it will be food for us. And that's basically the message of Sukkot. As you bring in from the threshing floor, from the threshing of the nations, there's going to be abundant bread for those who assemble to celebrate the feasts. So again, just the review. Why is there only 4 horses? Because remember, they run on a circuit. So your white horse, he'll be dealing with the 1st and the 7th seal. Your red horse with the 2nd and the 6th. Your 3rd horse with the 3rd and the 5th. And of course, the pale horse, death. His influence is seen in all of it. And what you can see, if you can see that whole circuit running there, you can also see why the rainbow would be a sign. Because the rainbow is what you can't see. The earthly menorah you could see. There's a golden menorah. You could see the physical manifestation. But if you look at the rainbow, if you set the rainbow on top, then you're looking at a representation of the spirit of the covenant. And so you can see the whole picture, which is how we have to engage his word. We can't just engage his word as a mere letter. A mere letter, what does it say? It kills. But the Spirit gives life. And that's what we're looking for, a transformation of the Spirit. So let's stop and think about the black horse a little bit. Let's review him a little more. We haven't said much about him, but the black horse has a particular message. It's as if the speech of the rider on the black horse is what we need to hear. You don't really hear the white horse rider. You just know he's going out. He's going forth conquering and to conquer. You know, with the red horse, you see the sword. But it's the black horse, it's the words that the rider is using that we have to pay special attention to that. We're not told so specifically, this is famine. You can surmise that it's famine based on what he says and the scales of justice that he's holding. But I think there's a little more to be learned here with the black horse. And part of that is what he is doing is signaling the final redemption. And you say, well, isn't all of this signaling the final redemption? Yes, but the black horse is doing it in a specific way. Remember, he's the third one to ride out. And he's going to bring in some contextual partners. It's an idea, like John 22:20. It says, he who testifies to these things says, yes, I am coming quickly. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. All right. If he's just coming when he's coming at an appointed time, there's no reason to say quickly. Yeshua talks about if those days had not been shortened. What do they mean? Days are shortened. He's coming quickly. That tells you that there can be a shortening of days, or even the perception of it might be different for those who are saying, Amen, come Lord Jesus, than those who really aren't looking for him. It's the idea that for some people, his return or this redemption could come more quickly than anticipated. And you're saying, well, how could that happen? We wish it had happened, years ago. But nevertheless, if we're only looking at the days of King Messiah's reign, if we're looking at the 1,000-year reign of Messiah, there's quite a bit of history there that we have to deal with, 1,000 years of history. Imagine 1,000 years back. A lot has happened in the last 1,000 years. Well, a lot will happen under King Messiah's reign. And then there's going to be another day that's revealed, an eighth day that it said no human eye has seen. I think Isaiah maybe says no human eye has seen it. Well, what can we expect? Because sometimes it's easy in the book of Revelation to maybe get some things mixed up with what will happen just prior to the reign of King Messiah, and then what will happen just prior to the eighth day. And like I say, no eye has seen, no ear has heard. We don't know what that eighth day is going to look like. We just know it's going to be probably even better than the millennial reign. So let's go to Isaiah 60:19. He's describing something here, and because he's saying no eye has seen it, most likely what Isaiah is describing here is this period of time known as the 1,000-year reign of King Messiah. He says, no longer will you have the sun for light by day, nor will the moon give you light for brightness, but you will have the Lord as an everlasting light, and your God is your glory. Your sun will no longer set, nor will your moon wane. For you will have the Lord as an everlasting light, and the days of your mourning will be over. Then all your people will be righteous. They will possess the land forever. The branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. The smallest one will become 1,000, and the least a mighty nation. I, the Lord, will bring it about quickly in its time. Okay, there's another example where he's saying, I'm going to bring it about quickly. Well, why do you have to say quickly? Why not just say, I will bring it about in its time? There's no reason to put quickly in there if it isn't being quickened quickly. So what Isaiah is trying to help us see are the days of Messiah. They're called the Yemot Mashiach. And what he's telling us is that the righteous during this time will enjoy a supernal light. It'll be like the first light of creation without the sun, the moon, or stars. You don't need it because it's the light of his presence. It's the lamp is the Lamb. And so Revelation is telling us that those who have access to the holy city, if their citizenship is in Jerusalem, then they have the benefit of this supernal light at all times. Now, what's happening out there among the nations, not so clear. But what's happening in Jerusalem is going to be this supernal light. There's eventually going to be a merging of the Jerusalem above. It's going to descend, and according to the sages' interpretation, the physical Jerusalem will also be lifted up a certain degree. And they will be married. You know, it talks about how it will descend like a bride adorned for her husband. The idea is this is the way it was at the beginning. In the time of the Garden of Eden and the physical world were joined. And then after sin, there was a withdrawal. There was a separation. And so the Jerusalem above withdrew a certain degree. And of course, this is in the fallen world. And so when they come back together for the sake of the righteous and King Messiah's reign, then this will descend and then this will also merge. And you'll have one. They will be married. At this time, it says, all Israel will be righteous and they will share in the land forever. And this is why the Holy Land is so holy. There's a unique citizenship there. And there's an inheritance there because it won't be just the dust and the rocks that we see today. We will see it transformed as the garden. We will be able to see what's hovering just above the land of Israel. And in fact, that particular place, according to the prophets, its boundaries will extend all the way up to the Euphrates and down to the tongue of Egypt. So the little tiny nation that we see today will be much larger at that time, the time that King Messiah achieves peace. And so those who are citizens of Jerusalem and the land at that time, they will receive a share. They will literally have an inheritance there. You receive an inheritance when you acknowledge that you have no inheritance. If that doesn't make sense, I know. When it's like tithing. If you just acknowledge that tithe was not yours to begin with, you're just giving back to him what was always his. He owns the cattle on the 1,000 hills. What are you going to give back to him? It never was yours. It's the same thing with the land. When you can come to the place where I have nothing, and if he gives me anything, I'm just giving back to him what was his to begin with. Once you arrive at that place, then you are fit. You are garden ready. Now he can assign you a portion, and he won't have to worry about you behaving like a serpent or a beast in his field and trying to elevate your throne above his throne. You've seen the light, like he says, that supernal light at all times. But he predicts a condition that I want to examine in the next program. It's a prophetic element. And often I think we just skip over it because it just sounds nice. It says the smallest will become 1,000 and the least a mighty nation. It's hinting to us that there will be a kind of equality there that we've never experienced before on this earth. There's going to be a population in Israel, and they are going to achieve a balance in spiritual benefits. They are going to receive assigned portions in the garden. They are going to be productive in those assigned portions. And what it's predicting, again, it's what perhaps other systems like communism and socialism, they've tried to achieve and they can't because they're human inventions. But what he's showing us is the biblical, the scriptural plan from the beginning And that'll help us decode maybe what's going on with the black horse in the next program.